Okay.
Thank you, G. So here we are at the end panel of the day. We've had a lot of really interesting, powerful conversations come out of today. I'll be taking a lot home with me from today just to ruminate over. And we decided this panel should be around something that's very important that disabled women have a voice on in the current political situation that we're in, which is Brexit. The Brexit campaigns gave little space to discuss the concerns of disabled people, even though the implications for disabled people in the UK, the implications don't look good. The situation is already terrible with cuts to welfare, cuts to health and social care budgets, and the situation is really uncertain at the moment, and it's a crucial time to make sure that disabled women have a voice and are able to speak to what we want from the current situation. So here we are with our panellists from today to discuss this very thing.
No, I just wanted to read, because at the same time, if this wasn't happening, I would be at Conway Hall, because BARAC, which stands for Black Activists Rising Against
Cuts.
Against cuts, yeah. And they're talking about post-Brexit, and we couldn't be there, and we prepared a statement. And Zita said that she's going to ask the chair to read it out. I hope she does, if she gets this. So I thought I'd read it out to you as well, so you get an idea, and maybe that will give an idea about what us could speak about as panelists. So, okay. We would like to send a message of solidarity to this meeting, as we are holding our own event at Blackfriars Settlement, Disabled Women Voices from the Frontline. Sisters of Frida is a disabled women's collective. We are a collective for all self-identified disabled women, and we are committed to an international, intersectional perspective on our day-to-day realities. Sisters of Frida condemns the increase in racist attacks after the referendum, and is concerned how these attacks and Brexit affect disabled women, particularly disabled women of color. We are concerned about how disableism, sexism, racism, homophobia, xenophobia, and Islamophobia affect disabled women. As part of the disabled community, we have seen a rise in disability hate crime in recent years too. Sisters of Frida is worried how disabled women of color and European migrants have become pawns in the current political situation and are facing multiple discrimination and exclusion. We are concerned about how Brexit and the conversations after Brexit are scapegoating those reliant on the NHS and other health-related and welfare support and benefits. We are also concerned how disabled people are portrayed and treated. As Sisters of Frida, we are particularly concerned about how Brexit affects disabled women in the UK who are EU nationals. We are disquiet how this affects British and non-EU migrant disabled people in the UK, particularly those of people of color, Muslim, LGBT, and European communities. We are also worried by the impact on disabled people who rely on migrant workers to support their independent living, and how Brexit would exacerbate austerity cuts. We hope your meeting will be fruitful. Let us unite in working together in moving forwards towards a fair and just society with an inclusive, supportive, and safe environment in the future. Unity is strength. Let's hope that's going to be done. Thanks.
What a statement to start on.
I should say that G crafted it, most of it.
A team effort. So, what comes to our minds when, in the wake of Brexit, what are the immediate concerns that come to the forefront of our minds, and who do we need to speak with? Who do we need to have that conversation with in order to find not only our individual voice but our collective voice? Any of our panellists wish to take me up?
I think there hasn't been a lot of clear information about Brexit. I feel like myself and most of the people my age aren't really that well informed about Brexit, and I think this is the only time in our lives that we would have had such a huge opportunity to make a change in politics, and we knew nothing about it. And I feel like the same was kind of reflected in the older population as well. Like, I think with people under 25 and then people over 65, there was a lot of kind of misinformation and confusion about what we were voting for, because I know that with my mother's friends and her older friends especially, and my grandparents' friends, there was a lot of they believed that the Leave Party was kind of supporting giving money back to the NHS and kind of removing the amount of immigrants, but I don't know why people so easily believe that the money that we spend on the EU is going to go back to the NHS, but people did believe that, and I think a lot of young people kind of voted to remain because they saw that was the trend on social media. I agree with their choice to vote to remain, but I think they weren't really kind of well informed as to why they were voting to remain. So I think that the most important thing, first of all, for finding a collective voice is that we have to know what we're actually finding a voice about. And we have to be clear on what we're speaking about.
So we don't know what this is going to look like, what the picture's going to look like, what the future's going to look like. And particularly for many disabled women, ourselves, who in the workers that we attract, and the pay is low, but we have no control with some of these things. So yes, we didn't have enough information. I agree with what Becky said. I voted to remain. But I think many people who voted to Brexit weren't quite clear about what they were voting. I think that's what some of the main problems is. Lots of different stories I've heard. But I think for disabled people, I think some of these things we need to really think about how is that going to impact on our lives. Because we don't know what's happening in the future, it makes it very difficult about what we actually are discussing here today.
Kirsty?
Yes. The whole Leave campaign was based on lies. And that was a major problem, lies which immediately became apparent after the vote, like the one about the NHS, yes, £350 million a day, you can have it back tomorrow, and the whole fact that they were talking about taking back our country, and other rather horrible phrases. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that austerity, years and years of austerity have just knocked people senseless across the country, particularly in places where unemployment was higher, particularly in places where their main industry had collapsed, and where they found many people on the dole, and many people kind of like living on the poverty level. And so quite a lot of people in those poor areas, they saw incomers, they saw economic migrants, particularly from the EU, who would competing with them for basic grade jobs and getting them. And they saw that as a huge issue for them. And they were encouraged by this government and the previous coalition government to see those things as unfairness, to blame migrants and and refugees for the poverty that they, as UK citizens, experience quite deliberately. We have seen this in all those dreadful campaigns around benefits, about the whole thing about you go to work, you look up and see your neighbour next door, curtains are closed because they're lying around in bed watching daytime telly because they're basically lazy scroungers. And they added that to all this other stuff around, EU people taking out jobs. But the fact of the matter is, if European citizens are sent home, how will our NHS run? Yeah. Our NHS is full of fantastic nurses and doctors from across the European Union and across the world, people who've come to this country to give this nation support. For many of those coming from the Commonwealth as well, like the motherland, even though that's still that old-fashioned, slightly difficult thing, but still important to come back and help and to be part of this country and to take up the opportunities that were offered.
It's often been seen that to polarise EU workers' presence with unemployment, and it's not true. It's not true. But that was sold by the Conservative government, by the previous government, and by the Leave campaign. And as a result of that, we saw hate fuel. And even Polish people are told to go home. It's not happened before. You know, all those that it becomes quite, stark in that way. Even where I live, there's been horrible racial attacks on a range of communities. And I think that that's important to know that. I also think the other thing that's very important to know this is that we live in a parliamentary democracy. This was a referendum. It is advisory. The government and Parliament will now be going through and voting on this. If I were Parliament, I would listen to the people, even though it was a small majority who said leave. But also to be aware that their Parliament will now be tangled up in legislation for the next 3 or 4 years as they try and migrate policies to the UK that they want and try to leave behind policies that they don't want, like the Human Rights Act and the European legislation, and some of the things that affect us every day, like standards on wheelchair spaces on bus. That's a European statute. Yeah, Braille labels on medicines. That's a European statute. All those kinds of things that if the Parliament will have to decide which of those we keep, which of those we don't. So our job, because we're in this place, is to lobby to include as much as possible. That's our job, is to argue so we can't do anything about it. We can lobby to try and stop the worst happening, and that's awful to have to do because it doesn't feel satisfied. Because I just want to lie on the floor and scream.
I kind of pick up from what you said there, Kirsten. I fear we're going back to times when my parents came here in the 1950s, when we had Enoch Powell talked about the Rivers of Blood speech. I don't know if any people remember these speeches. I wasn't old enough, I wasn't born all the time, but my parents often spoke a lot about Rivers of Blood. And this referendum was no different from the Rivers of Blood speech. Also, my parents would tell me stories about when they came, they'd have signs of no dogs, no Irish, no Jews, no blacks. So we are stepping and rolling back into those times. And those times we're starting to see quite clear by the way people's behaviours are. And one of the fears of that is, I'm speaking with myself as a black disabled woman, is how much, you already experience levels of discrimination and barriers, but when it becomes even more evident and people actually call you and be discriminatory in your face, and even openly say whatever they like, what is that experience going to be like for us?
I think Jackie's got a point over here.
I was going to say, like, the whole referendum, like Becky said, like there wasn't enough information. I know people who I speak to regularly, who grew up on the same road, and they were, oh yeah, I voted to leave because I didn't think it was going to count, because they didn't get the information that they should have got in the first place. There was a lot of, oh it's this, oh no maybe it's this. There was nothing that was actually set in stone that people could be like, okay, this is what it is. But at the same time, whatever political party is in power, or whatever political party in general, disabled people always seem to be at the bottom of the agenda. And then even at the bottom of the agenda, disabled women are at the bottom of that agenda. So we're right at the bottom, where I think that it's a time now, and things are changing so much, that even like we should start on political parties, because fair is fair, right is right, wrong is wrong. And I don't think the politicians who we have put in power are realizing the decisions they make today are going to affect them 10 years, 20 years from now, to the point that we might end up being absolutely bankrupt. Nobody wants to come here. Our pound will go down to like nothing, and they don't realize that all of the decisions they're making now and how they feel today, they're going to feel differently in a year's time. So I think it's really about, I don't know how, I don't know how laws and things work like that, but starting a political party is probably the only way forward, because technically we don't have a prime minister right now. So what do we do?
Have one. David Cameron is still.
He's still prime minister until September, October.
Yeah.
So okay, we have one, but once he leaves, I wasn't happy him being prime minister. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that out loud.
We're definitely allowed to say that.
I wasn't happy with me and Prime Minister, but then I'm afraid to see who the next person is going to
It's
be.
going to be worse.
Yeah, and I think that's the fear I have. Like, we already were the bottom of the pack. You're just going to push us down further,
Yeah.
and that is the most frustrating thing. That I have no control of what my future is saying in a country where I was born and raised and have family and everything like that.
Finding voices, using our voice, developing our voice, developing confidence in our voice. Who have we been speaking to about this and about our feelings about this? Where has it felt safe to talk about this, and how can we build on those spaces?
I was just going to say, this is more in response to what Jackie said about how politicians aren't really seeing how the consequences of their actions will affect them in the future. I think you're totally right, and I think that's really obvious, like by how people are kind of absconding from their jobs now that Brexit has been put in place.
Sorry, not all of their job. I mean, it's for them to, have an idea of what the future holds. Yeah, it's their jobs. To think about a plan for from now on to, the future.
I think politicians, especially, they only sit within their bubble. So if it doesn't affect them or their friends or people that they do business with, they don't think about it. So right now they'll be like, oh, well, if we leave, we're going to have more business, we're not going to have to go through Europe, we're going to do this. But they don't realise that it's actually better for it to go through, like trade and things like that, to go through other countries first. Like they just think, oh, I'm going to make more money on this, or I think a lot of politicians are corrupt. That's my personal opinion, and I think there's a lot of backhand deals and people talking in secret cupboards and people like signing different things, because I think they don't think, oh, next year or 5 years or 10 years. They think, oh, if it doesn't affect me and these two people, I'm not going to worry about people at the end. Where they should be thinking about the whole, because the whole of the UK put you in power. So what are you doing?
What? Oh, I'm feeling quite depressed now.
I mentioned about building on the spaces that we have, because we do have voices, however we express ourselves. And at a time where we're having to find safe spaces to discuss how this referendum has made us all feel, because it's put a lot of us under a lot of emotional stress, a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty, how do we build the spaces, the safe spaces that we have already, and how do we expand them?
Okay, one of the things I think is very important is that I think that we should be talking to those in our communities who voted leave. And we should be talking in a way which is about, let me understand you, and trying to foster understanding, because this referendum has happened, the decision's been made. As I say, we are a parliamentary democracy.
Can you speak a bit louder?
We are a parliamentary democracy, though the decision's been made, that is not the end, basically. But I think that our communities are a little bit divided, especially poorer people who feel less able to kind of like manage in many kind of ways, and people who are less kind of connected to social media and all those kinds of things feel really quite alienated from other people in their community. And the thing I've been struggling with is talking to people on my street who voted leave, and I'm trying my best to kind of, because I really want to understand. I want to understand in the way that goes, okay, that's the decision you made, but let me understand what your life is like that made you want to do this. Some of them will have, and do have, very obnoxious views. And some of them have actually made this decision for false information, and some of them have made it for very real worries of their own, and they're things that I sometimes think we haven't listened to.
I've got one question for Kirsten. When you have those conversations, what are the main kind of themes that come out?
It's the thing about employment. They talk a lot about kind of like, the local, one of them said to me, my son went for, he was a school leaver, went for a low, first entry kind of job with kind of like a company doing really kind of, and he had X number of people, and it was given to somebody from Europe who got a degree. and that all those people are taking our jobs. That's what he said. And the whole thing is really interesting because I think the argument's about this. It's about what we pay our workers, and that some people are prepared to work for less. That's not because they don't necessarily value their life. It's because company owners, capitalists, geeks, etc., are exploiting them too. They're being exploited too by working for such low wages. And you see this in parts of the country where we have things like industries like the flour industry in Cornwall and vegetables in Norfolk, all those kind of places. Lots and lots of migrant workers who are there, many of whom are quite well qualified, but who are prepared to work for those rates. And it's not kind of that everybody else isn't prepared to work for those rates. It's just that those business owners are exploiting that group of people by offering such low wages. And obviously national minimum wage, all that sort of thing is really, really important, I think, to actually raise what we pay people in that kind of way. That's one of the things. But the neighbour's son was unhappy because an EU migrant got this entry-level job that he felt he should have. And that it's very difficult to hear that, actually. Really difficult, because I have to have a conversation about entitlement. And I find it quite hard, but he's been told by the Daily Mail, by all these right-wing people, that it's European migrants taking his job. It's really difficult. And we have to challenge that by talking to people about it.
If it keeps being said, it becomes a refrain, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Jean.
It becomes true. Yeah.
What you say, Kristen, what concerns me a little bit about that is sort of that portrayed as if it's something new.
No.
Like, as if there's all of a sudden this sort of like fear from like European migrants, which generally are particularly European migrants because they never talk about me for some reason, And I think that sort of leads to what actually the problem is, and this is a history of imperialism and colonialism and racism, and that is not something new, and it's the kind of like you refer to as well. This has been like, it's not like 5 years, or 10 years, or 15 years. Do you know what I mean?
Hundreds.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I think it should be sort of said out. Like there is a deeper problem here, And the other thing is, I'm sort of like also going to go back to the point is, Michelle, you brought in and also you asked, what can we do as Sisters of Frida? And for me personally, that's as well. Like, what can I offer? What can we offer each other? If you encounter shit, do you know what I mean? Like if something becomes real, in your face or like in your pockets or like somewhere else, you know what I mean? Like what is it that we can do for each other? And also how can we get more information from each other, from other people, and to other people as well. Like we have a blog, like what can we do? Do you know what I mean? Like,
what resources can we build? What kind of sharing spaces can we commit to?
Community, like how can we support each other?
I think Jackie was next.
I just want to say that we're sort of running out of time, so we ought to.
I just wanted to say about government. Exploit workers. It drives down wages and deliberate ploy to drive down wages. But of course, they're bringing migrant workers, and it's not actually their fault. They're in the position to take the job, whatever, work for less wages, because they're earning more than what they were in their own home. Because they live on their incomes here, because rich people can't do that. Because they might have a home, or they've got commitments, they pay taxes, or whatever. They can't actually afford. They need a higher wage. So that's why. The interesting thing, how they're blaming migrant workers, is actually blame belongs to the government, and the business owners, and the people who are actually created the situation of their own gains to line their own pockets.
Sorry, I was just going to say that excuse of, everyone needs to go home because they're taking our jobs. Some people are really picky about the jobs they want to do, and that's fine. But if you are in a situation or that you need a job, you're not going to mind where you work because you need that job. So you're using that excuse of, they're here to take our jobs, is absolutely ridiculous, because if you wanted a job that badly, I'm sure you could find one. I'm sure you could find, but it might not be what you want to do, but if you're desperate enough, you would take, okay, for instance, my next door neighbor, his complaint is, oh, everyone's here to take my job. He got offered a job at McDonald's, he got offered a job at a reception, as a receptionist, and he got offered another, I think it was security, and he turned them all down because he said he didn't want to do it. So you can't complain with one breath saying, oh, they're taking our job. But then when you get offered a job, you don't want to take it, then you have no argument. Then there's nothing for you to say after that. So using that as an excuse is ridiculous to me. Absolutely ridiculous.
Thank you. No, I was saying, picking up on a bit what Kirsten says, to understand the reason people don't vote for Brexit. And I did the same, ask people what was the reason for your vote. There's 2 points I want to make. First, I believe that the government created a divide, rule and conquer. I think we're going back to those kind of ways of thinking. Because when I was speaking to some people, what was your reason why you Brexit? Just to try and understand what makes people think about what they're doing. So one of the most interesting stories I heard was around, around visas. We had to get visas and had to fight hard to get into the country. So therefore, so should others. Why can they have free movement? So these kind of things, I think, would have definitely been one of these divide, rules and conquer, right? Dividing people about how, so their taste. So therefore, we started to divide people into little groups. And that's one of the points was made, is that why people voted, maybe not, we keep repeating the same thing, not understanding, but it wasn't, I just think about the NHS. It wasn't just about jobs and some other deeper issues why people were voting. And much of these votes were based on what's fair for me, so it's not fair for them. So these are some issues that I think we need to, and I think that wasn't made clear in terms of the discussions, but also people didn't really understand the history of the UK. What happened in this referendum is just a replay of what happened years and years and years and years ago, and will continue. And I think the situation will become worse.
One line is they keep saying things can't get much worse. I'm sorry, they can get much worse. It's that they don't realise yet. But I think
we're out of time, unfortunately. We were over time kind of through the day. I think we got a bit excited in the early part of the day. But we've started a conversation here, and the beauty of this conversation is it's not one that has to end now. It's one we can pick up at other times, at other Sisters of Frida events, and move this conversation forward.
Sorry to interrupt you, but maybe, got all your emails, maybe we could formulate something and then we could send it out to you guys and say, would you like, this is what we're doing, how would you like to contribute, would you like to tell your story, maybe that's one way, we're talking about voices, so maybe this is one way we can, because we have to add the disabled women's voice to all the voices that are out there.